Good evening again, everyone. Ambassador, welcome here again. As I stated earlier on, this is part of a series, though today's themed with the EU, but we had hosted the Norwegian ambassador, the Canadian head of mission, the World Bank, and several other experts and also like individuals who are leading in this country. With the aim of just getting in touch with the youth and also like sharing their journey and also talking about the work that they're doing in the country. In the interest of those who probably don't know a lot about the EU or have not met you before, maybe you can just start by telling us your name and what you do.
Okay, thank you. First, after that amazing performance here, I was wondering how you take it from there, but you did it quite smoothly. So I was really, really touched. As the other performances here as well. I think Emma Kwadje is like Tracy Chapman.
Yes.
If you know the fast car, But all the performances really, really great. And it's really an honor to be here. You referred to the colleagues who had already been here, so it's making you jealous because Seniors Hub is the place to be. So,
yeah.
So it was, this is basically an excuse for me to come here and perform. Just to start with, so my name is Timo Olkkonen. I'm the head of delegation of the European Union here in South Sudan. As you know, the European Union is comprised of several European member states, 27. At the moment, and I come from one of them, which is Finland, that joined the European Union in 1995. And I joined the European Union I've been working a little bit on and off with the EU before, but I used to work for the Finnish Foreign Service. Now I'm working for the EU, first in Zimbabwe and now here in South Sudan. Very happy to be here.
Okay, so you worked for the EU first in Zimbabwe, right?
I was the EU head of delegation also in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, okay. I think let me start with Finland, then I come to the EU. Also, again, I don't know how many people here can locate Finland in the map. I think for South Sudanese, few. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about Finland.
Right. Finland is a nation of around 5.5 million people. It's between Sweden and Russia. St. Petersburg is quite close. St. Petersburg hosts, in its environment, almost 10 million people, so Finland is much, much smaller. Finland used to be around 700 years a part of the Swedish kingdom. Then it was, after the Napoleonic Wars, or during, it was annexed to Russia, and it was a part of Russia for 100 more years. And then in 1917, during the First World War, it gained then its independence. So it was not very long ago when we celebrated 100 years of Finnish independence. It's a republic, and it's part of the Nordic countries. Most of the Nordic countries are monarchies, but Finland is a republic. We fought the war in the Second World War. We had wars with the Soviet Union, skirmish with Germany. After that, we have been living in peace. But but it was only in 1995 that actually we joined the European Union. So we were not one of the original founders. It took us, almost 30, 40 years to become a member of the European Union. And we became a NATO member just very, very recently, actually. And that was a consequence of Russia's aggression on Ukraine. So now Finland, you could say, is fully integrated to the Western world, so to speak.
So it's part of the EU, and also it's part of NATO now.
That's right. Yeah.
It's one when one kind of like meets a European ambassador, probably like history of conflict doesn't come to mind, but it seemed like Finland had kind of a reasonable kind of history and kind of conflicts and which makes you relate to some extent to what is happening in South Sudan or in Sudan right now.
That is true, actually. Finland has had its share of conflicts situated between East and the West. So it was basically always a battleground between Sweden and Russia. even starting from the medieval times. So it was part of that. We have had a civil war in 1918, quite a bloody one in terms of per capita casualties. It was worse, for example, than the Spanish Civil War, which is considered quite bloody. But maybe I shouldn't be saying talking about these things, you know, considering the extremely violent history of South Sudan. So, and those are further in history. And then in the Second World War, indeed, we were invaded by the Soviet Union. Managed to have, in fact, well, 2 wars within the Second World War with the Soviet Union. Managed to retain our independence, lost some territories, but this lives in our memory. It was because those were fateful days. It was really that, you know, the people were fighting for their independence, and it mobilized the whole small nation in a way that really resonates today with the Russian aggression on Ukraine. People remember this, you know, that it is kind of a repeat of history of what has happened to us before and what is happening there now. So it is because the casualties, the losses were very significant. And so it's like all the families, you know, now our veterans have almost all gone, are almost all gone, but you know, the stories live in families, and so.
And kind of like to tie it to the EU, I think, you know, like a lot of the times when someone says like, the EU ambassador and then the French ambassador, I'm like, okay.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
I know what you
like,
mean.
Okay. It's like it's like a family that is represented by 2 fathers. So maybe you can distill for us, what is the idea of the EU? If someone just like, I mean, for a benefit of someone, what is this EU idea? When someone says EU, which ideals, what does it represent?
EU represents an idea, and that's quite interesting. When we were talking about, there was this brief presentation about the Schuman Declaration and what this guy Robert Schuman, the French foreign minister, then said in 1950, actually, when the whole thing started, and it started with coal and steel, and this is a long story. But he said that, you know, it was about peace. It started about peace. It was only 5 years after the end of the Second World War. And which was basically for these very, you know, European-minded people already then, is that this should not happen again. So they harnessed coal and steel, put it under the control of a supranational authority, which then became the European Coal and Steel Community. So it took the control of the French and German coal and steel assets, which were instruments of war. You know, the Second World War, it was fueled by coal and steel. And actually, so, and you know, you had the conflicts before, the First World War, the wars before that. So it's like, no more. So we'll start from this. Let's take these strategic resources under a common control. And that's the origin. But then Schuman already then in 1950 says that, look, you know, this is, we are getting together, but it is...
For a South Sudanese audience, coal is like oil. Just to make it a bit resonate here.
True. Very much so. Part of the fossil fuel, you know, all of that. So, but then it was, he recognized already then, I bet not everybody in 1950 recognized, but he was already saying that this integration can take different paths and move in different ways. And to start with the European integration, which is the European Economic Community, then the European Community, and finally the European Union, started as an economic project. Because at that stage, you know, the European countries were reluctant, you know, to compromise on their political sovereignty. So it started with economic integration, slowly opening up, free trade area, customs union, and that was at the core of it. You know, the European single market is the second biggest economy in the world. After the United, well, now China is there as well. So
maybe also can distill. So like the single market, it's idea that goods can move between EU countries
Without any hindrance.
without any hindrance, and then they follow a certain. Though some people joke about it, that it's all about the size of the carrot and how it looks like. But it means like goods. If we had a single market here, goods from Uganda, South Sudan, and Kenya can move without any hindrance, without need for more taxes, and the rest is all unified.
Yeah, no customs there. You pay, if you import something to the European Union, you pay the customs on arrival, but then the goods can move freely. And there's nothing else. And it's not as simple, perhaps, as it sounds, because there's all kind of standards, like phytosanitary standards and insurance, and all kind of technical details that need to be taken into account when you create something like this. So it was not like an overnight thing, but it took place over time.
I think, Ambassador, maybe to mirror it, because we're talking about EU-Africa collaboration and also South Sudan, that whole, what you just described, it led to like considerable prosperity and improve in the life standards of so many citizens.
That's true, because trade creates prosperity. You know, and the less you have obstacles for trade, you know, and that's why European Union is a great supporter of African economic integration agendas as well, because we know it from experience that it's good for you. It is painful, because if you create these areas, then you have to give up of protection, you know, your protection of certain industries or whatever. And it's a question of tough political choices.
Yeah, and kind of just to talk about the challenges here, like in the continent right now as we speak, we have considerable challenges. Just moving goods between people, I mean, like if you want to, some African countries, if you want to fly to them, you actually have to go to Europe. Like if I want to fly from here to, I don't know, Casablanca or whatever, I'll probably have to connect through a European country and then come back. Just flying between Kenya here, the tickets are so expensive because it's taxed in Kenya, taxed here. So when you look at that and you mirror it to the continent, what European objectives do you project in the continent in order to help kind of reduce these obstacles that we're facing right now?
Well, we are supporting regional integration agendas. There's a number of regional communities in Africa that are doing a little bit overlapping things and so forth. But for example, we had a project of supporting South Sudan's accession to the East Africa community. So giving, you know, technical assistance to do that. I think it's a noble goal of trying to get this kind of integration. And it's a lot about technical details about customs tariffs and, you know, how to lower them down gradually and then to abolish them and so forth. So it requires this technical expertise. But at the core, the decisions are political. You know, imagine certain countries having certain industries, and then they say that we are not going to protect you guys anymore. So your production might get hurt about us opening the borders for imports from other countries. And so that's a political choice, and it can be a very tough one to make. So it's the attention to technical details combined with political boldness.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's talk about the young people who are kind of present here. The continent has a very young population. And I think, I mean, people say, in fact, like, growth through birth rate is happening very high here in Africa. In other countries, that is declining. In other places, growth is through immigration and the rest. But here, we have a very young population. In South Sudan, it's even younger. What does the EU see in terms of kind of harnessing the power of the youth and also supporting the youth?
Yeah. No, what you're saying is true. When you look globally about population growth, and we started to be like 9 billion, 10 billion on the planet, and the population growth has almost everywhere in the world, it has subsided, including in Asia. Africa is still the place where population is growing. So it's clearly it's a challenge, but it could be an opportunity as well. So it's said that it's the demographic dividend. You know, if you could harness the productivity of the young people for economic growth. So that's what we are trying to help doing. And in Africa, you know, it's like 22, maybe even more million young people come to the job market every year, which is quite significant. In other countries, the population growth is higher, but the tendency is that the demographic curve, so to speak, is that there's a lot of young people, and South Sudan especially, 77% of the population can be described as being young. So what to do with this? You know, we know that, you know, idle hands are the devil's workshop, as they say. And you know that in South Sudan, we recognize we have this amazing story about child soldiers. That's a reality, you know, if you don't have other livelihoods. So the issue is how to provide those alternative ways of life and alternative ways of living your life and making your income. And here, education, of course, is key. That you need to have education in order to starting from primary education. And now, currently, we have a program by the European Commission that we have basically 10% of whatever development cooperation we give has to go to education.
To education.
So that's one thing. So we have been supporting primary education in South Sudan. We are going to do that in the continuation. But of course, you know, after primary education, that's not enough. Then you would need to have opportunities. We are supporting vocational training, entrepreneurship, you know, in order to try to give, you know, pathways for young people to make their living. But of course, you know, with our resources alone, it won't be enough. It can't be enough. But I think of these programs that we are supporting, these projects we are supporting, also as models of what could be done on a grander scale. I think
the EU actually is very much incentivized to do that, because some of these young people, if they're not employed, if they're in conflict, they end up on EU shores. They cross the Atlantic. I mean, they end up in Italy, Lampedusa, where Greece. It's the link between conflict and lack of opportunities in Africa, and at least some African countries, and EU, there is a direct line in some places.
No, that's very true. You know, and this whole immigration debate, which is part, by the way, of the Europe-Africa dialogue. Immigration is a particular focus, and there's a particular program of focus on you know, how to try to use immigration in a way that it would be more of a win-win situation. And of course, we are not succeeding it at the moment with all these tragedies happening in the Mediterranean and so forth. There's a lot of issues around it. But yes, there's an interest of tackling that Africa would be prosperous in its own right, not only because of selfish reasons that people would stay here, because actually Europe also needs people, because unlike in Africa where you have this population growth, we have an aging population where you have start to be in a situation in many countries, well, actually, who is going to pay for our pensions? How are we going to maintain the welfare state when there's more older people than younger people? So I think, you know, the question is how to be clever about it so that it would benefit, you know, both continents. But we would need to have also Africa as prosperous and a peaceful continent in general, because we want to engage with Africa, we want to trade with Africa, we want to invest in Africa. And so there is, you know, how to manage this issue about migration is very important. And that migration, in a situation when you look at, you know, people that, you know, migrate and end up in the shores of the Mediterranean, they are, you know, it's not the poorest of the poor that go there, because we need to have certain means in order to get
smuggle yourself through the desert.
Exactly.
Let's talk about South Sudan, because then I'll open it up for questions. Yeah. Where is the money going? Let me be direct. Like, there are like slightly like 100 people here. They're asking like, okay, where is this EU money? Like, I want to see it. I want to feel it. I want to feel where the development decisions is going, and how is that happening? Because actually, like, I've seen it happen start with the Dutch embassy. at the risk of, not at the risk, at the, at the risk of putting you on the spot, but also like showering your embassy with a lot of praise, the Dutch actually have reached out to the youth over the last 1 year. And all of this, like, asking, okay, we have this 5 years, we want to do our development strategy. Tell us how should we spend our money, where should we invest. Actually, they have been talking to us kind of intermittently for the last 1 year and a half. Just like, okay, what is our development strategy? How do we spend our money? Which I actually find to be very progressive. I don't know to what extent that our feedback is going to shape things, but I find that very, very intentional in kind of engaging the youth. And some of the discussions have bore fruit. The rest, I think, we'll wait to see. There are a lot of young people here. They're probably like asking you, okay, Ambassador, good stuff. We love the EU. Now tell us, like, where's the money going? How are you spending it? There have been a lot of discussion that there is a huge disparity, that a lot of this development money goes into this, for lack of a better word, sinkholes of like big international organizations that then spend it, but it doesn't trickle down, or the youth are not able to see it. So maybe you can just like, give us the figures, the numbers, or the strategic priority areas and how the youth are involved in it.
All right. Adela, would you like to come here and say where... No. Well, yeah, okay. Well, I can give it a shot, but it's a very wide area, because now during this programming period we had like 208 million euro. So what is it? 220 million dollars that we are going to invest in terms of development cooperation in South Sudan. And those will be in the areas of social support, so health and education. It will be about governance, so giving technical assistance to some government authorities, but also supporting NGOs in being also demanders for their rights and so forth. And then we have green economic growth, which is mainly agriculture, but also issues such as biodiversity, climate change, and so forth. So this is more or less partly already started, because, and partly it's in the planning phase. So what are we doing with this money? So we have, for example, some of our money is coming, for example, in education sector. We are supporting teachers to have incentives to be at their workplaces in faraway villages. I think many people probably can appreciate that, you know, it's not perhaps an easy life for a qualified teacher in a village somewhere in a remote state.
So that's to kind of like what salary incentives? Or...
It's not salary, because we don't want to replace the government. And that's something that is clear for us, that, you know, we should not, because honestly, there's a lot of dependency on aid in South Sudan. And there's a lot of, you know, work that the aid community is doing, both through its humanitarian aid and partly through its development cooperation. And actually, when you look at the figures, the humanitarian aid cake is much bigger than the development cake. Yeah. For the EU, the difference is not that big, because we have been always engaged on the development side as well. But actually, a lot of that work we are doing in terms of health and education that should be at the responsibility of the government. But we are trying to support it in a way that we would get there.
Are there any youth incentivized? Because I've been having this discussion with some of the other development partners. And okay, you give money to, I don't know, UNFPA or UNHCR, or do you like say like, okay, look, we gave you this $5 million and what? Maybe through your procurement channel, can you have preferential treatment for youth through your employment or sub-granting? Do you nudge them to do anything that has to do with youth and women?
We have that on youth and women. I was mentioning, for example, about this vocational training, that we have targets for youth, youth obviously, but also for women in vocational training. We had, for example, when we were talking about what happens with our money, like on this vocational training program we have like created 2,000 internships for young South Sudanese in order to work in companies. And there was this visit, you know, maybe somebody from the audience, maybe some of you participate in these project visits where we had like these mechanics being trained and they have now internships in their workshops on the hospitality industry, working in hotels. So I think this quite, it's something that I think is concrete. We had a wonderful event 2 weeks ago at the EU compound at our delegation, where we had local producers of horticultural products. We had fruits and vegetables market there. And we're talking about over 300, 500 producers that came there and that we are supporting with technical assistance and marketing skills and so forth. And the majority of them are women, and many of them are young. So we have these kind of, so when you're looking at, what you achieve with a project, you really have to go to the grassroots levels. And I get that point of working through big organizations such as UN and so, but it's almost something that has to be done in a country like South Sudan, where you can't work through government public financial management channels. So then your alternative is to work through the large UN organizations, but it's not like just we give them.
And I think what you're not saying is because like initially development aid used to be given to the government directly.
That's correct.
But I think mismanagement and a lot of issues to do with financial management made aid to go through other partners that it can be audited and the money can be seen to go somewhere.
That is the global story, but of course in countries where you can rely on, for example, the government budget processes and you have transparency and everything, then the easy way to do is basically just to support and put your money there, and then you trust the audits that are coming out.
That's kind of a conundrum, Ambassador. You're saying you don't want to replace the government, but also you're saying, okay, we can't put our money into the government. Don't you find that conflicting?
No, because in the end we want to support the country and the population, and it's just that currently these are the channels that we need to use. Yeah. So I would not be, we also have to be mindful that we are using European Union taxpayers' money, and there are the watchful ambassadors there looking after me, so it's something that you can't report back home that sorry, like 50 million was lost, because we couldn't, the audit didn't work out or something like that. It's not acceptable. So you have to choose the ways of how to operate. But in the long run, of course, you want to create sustainability, because the point with both humanitarian aid and maybe development aid in a bit of a longer term is that it should make itself useless.
Okay. So because this is an event for the youth, I will really probably want the mic to go to the other side a little bit. Is there anyone who benefited from any of the EU trainings? Anyone who kind of probably undertook program? Okay, to be clear, like through EU-funded program, not that you attended the training at the EU compound, but through any of the partners, you benefited from one of the programs?
Well, you benefited, Nelson.
Yes, okay, of course. Of course, the EU bought me this suit, something. Let me hear from you. Actually, I have a very interesting story about the EU. I was in Germany about 4 years ago, addressing these German politician and development practitioners. I mean, and one of them stood at the back, said like, Nelson, so tell us, how can you support it? I'm like, you can write me a check. He didn't appreciate that answer, but let me hear from you. Lad or someone can come. Do we have a third mic, or we can just have this mic go? Okay, super. You can have the ambassador's mic go to him, and you can just tell us a little bit. What's your name, and probably what is the program that you benefited from? And also, you can make a disclaimer that the EU did not pay you to say anything. Okay, you can stand up for the sake of the camera and everyone.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Doki Simon James. I'm a South Sudanese, and just 1 year ago, last year in August, I went to Belgium. I came this week on Monday, and it was a coincidence that I happened to be here, and I would like to appreciate Scanias Hub for hosting me, because I was looking for where I can access internet and power.
Okay, I did not pay him.
So, just before I go to my inquiries or the questions, I would like to really appreciate Scanias Hub and let this feedback go to whoever has funded this project, that there is already a testimony about it. Because I came back from Brussels, I have not finished my studies, but I was like, ooh, how am I going to attend online classes? In Juba, I'm among the 77% applicants lingering in the dark. When I go back, I have no power in my house. But I would like to give this to Scania's Hub for today.
So just a quick one. I'll come to the questions, huh?
Yeah.
I'll come to the questions.
Yeah.
Can I just take the testimony and then I come to your question? That you'll be the first person
Okay.
I take the question from.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, let me have the mic with anyone who benefited from an EU-funded program, training or something. Okay, super. Let me, you can just come this side.
Yeah.
And then after him, I'll come to you.
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Malek Arol Dio. I am a United Nations Youth Delegate, South Sudan. I benefited from the EU program in 2017 when I was a teacher in Yerul West County. So I signed a contract of 18 months, a $400 contract. And my salary was 512 FSP. The EU came and contracted us like, you will teach and at the end of the month you will be given 400 USD. Oh. You know us in South Sudan. The 400 USD was not given to us. We were given half $100, half a dollar, you see? And we were okay with it.
You're given how much?
50.
$50?
Yes. So out of it. So the rest of the money got lost all the way from here up to Yerul. Yeah. And our salary was 512 FSP. And $50 by then was like, it was like 1,000. So we were okay with it. We were okay. We couldn't mind about the rest of the money. So I benefited this way.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Ambassador, what do you say to this? I mean, you are not an ambassador by then, but do you think at times, like through the chain, something like some of the value, of course, not all the money will go there. There is facilitation and there is management, stuff like that, admin. I don't know, like...
Well, clearly there's a need for an audit of what happened if there was, you were promised something and you got much less. I'm quite confident about, that the financial management that we have works quite well, because one of the benefits of, well, you were complaining about the EU bureaucracy and, all these forms that you have to fill. But we have quite a solid accounting system about how we follow up these things. But it's not bulletproof. Obviously, that something can happen. That's like we will need to make these audits and follow the track and see if the results also have been achieved. But in addition to that, we have a whistleblower system. So that if there would be a problem in a project, so I don't know if you were all told, about the possibility to complain about this, or even if you complained about it, but it should be, these kind of things shouldn't happen, obviously, that if you would get less than you were supposed to. So without knowing more about the project and so, I can't say. But we want to tackle these things at different levels. We have our internal audit systems, we have our external auditors, the European Court of Auditors, and yes, and if we trust the financial management officer, for example, of a UN organization, then we need to get their audits in place. Yeah. And they should also be about results and not only about the money.
Yes. You need to audit also the outcomes. Okay. Now, let me take. Are you a beneficiary of an EU project? A question? Okay. So give him the mic. So we'll take one more testimony and then we can take questions. I mean, that was a twist. I never... you can come to the front because the mic probably might not reach up to there. If you just tell us if you're a beneficiary of an EU project.
Hello, everyone. Justus Victor Uwasa is my name. And for the last 4 years, I have been working on a project of immigration and civil-military relations in Yei, and that funding is coming through the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, CAS, Uganda, and South Sudan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, that's more from the Team Europe, yeah. Okay, we'll take questions. Let's take questions. Please, for the benefit, I don't want to keep us here for too long. Maybe we can have the questions. If someone wants to to ask a question, come this side. I'll be very strict. Just say your name, and then go to your question and make it one question. I know South Sudanese, we have a tendency of saying the second point 3 times. So just your name and then your question. Make it very concise and direct so that the ambassador can also be able to answer it and for the benefit of the audience.
Thank you very much. I'm by the name Arna Hoth. I'm a student from Uganda. I'm a South Sudanese. My question will be based on the humanitarian ground. You understand very, very well that there is a crisis in Sudan. And we have South Sudanese who have escaped the war in Sudan. I would like to ask the question, does the European Union have any intervention for the new arrivals, returnees that are coming from Sudan? Because I've seen on TV, the government is struggling alone to airlift these people. And the situation there is really dire. Some have failed to reach the border point. We have known in very many countries, whenever there is a war, the humanitarian intervention is always the only option, even when it happens in our country. So we would like to know, when will they do it? And do they have the plan to rescue these people?
Okay, thanks. Yeah. I would really request, like, if you have a question, there is a lady at the back, you can come. And then this gentleman. We'll take these questions and then we can go to the next. Unfortunately, we might not be able to take all the questions because the time is limited. Some of our ambassadors have a curfew. So
Yes.
the gentleman, then the lady, then we'll go to the 2. Are you still okay? Okay, our ambassador is chill. We can actually have a party afterwards. Okay, let's, yeah, I'll come to you. Let's have your question and then we'll go to the lady and then we'll come to
Okay, called Denilson Deneki Saniki. That's my name. Ambassador, my question goes to you because there's a lot of complaint that donors always, like when you are giving funding, you don't consider Juba. You look at Juba as if Juba is well off, and you always channel most of the resources to go outside Juba. What is the reason why you don't consider Juba, since it is a city, as one of also who is facing the challenges?
Okay.
Thanks.
I think the interesting, people outside ask the same question, but in reverse. So, okay, let's your name and then your question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Faith, and I'm a proud employee of Rock Media Group. My question is, we've heard a lot of stories of what you do with the government, with the NGOs. I happen to be employed in a private sector, and it's a national company, and I have a feeling there are so many national companies that are running businesses here. So does EU have a program for private sectors to ensure, because what we've seen, most of the time we're importing things from out. So do you guys have a program that caters for the private sector or national businesses?
I mean, the Dutch ambassador is nodding. They're the ones who have a lot of program on that. Probably I'll have an answer. Just wait, let me take the 2 gentlemen, then the ambassador answers, then I'll come back to you. Yeah. I think the question on private sector engagement, we can allow the Dutch ambassador to answer it.
Okay, so I already mentioned my name. My question goes like this. Many a times we travel to the EU, we find difficulties in terms of visa. So my question goes, is there any plan underway where at least we can have the embassy here? Because when I went to Belgium, really I faced a lot because I have to go to neighboring countries. And also, are there other countries that, some European countries may be willing to show interest later to have their embassies here in South Sudan like the others do?
I think you're asking like visa processing right now, Schengen visa and all the visas,
exactly,
either in Nairobi or in
Kampala,
or in Kampala. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, last one. So, when I reached home, I found many of my colleagues, they are having their contracts almost terminated because we are told that most of the funding is shifting to the European, I mean, the refugee crisis in Europe, in Ukraine currently. So, what is the plan of the EU in trying to balance this between European, I mean, the refugees in Ukraine and also still the situation in South Sudan? Thank you.
Super. Actually, that's a very important question because a lot of people are asking it also.
Thank you so much. My name is Malek Aroldi once again. The European Union is muchly involved in education. And when you look at education, there is one substance that is missing in education. And without this substance, the education is nothing. This substance is quality. And you have seen the education was declared free. But there is no, declaring education free is one thing, but making it have quality is another. So what is the AU's plan of the installment of quality education in South Sudan? Because you see there are a lot of malpractices. The exams are substandard. There are also chaos in marking. You see, these all amount to let's say quality poor education in South Sudan. So what is the AU's plan for quality education?
That seems like a question to the South Sudan government. but the EU can tackle it also.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Nelson. My name is Paul Chabiet. I'm a citizen of South Sudan. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for your wonderful presentation or rather discussion. In 2016, the then British Prime Minister, David Cameron, initiated Brexit from the European Union on reasons primarily immigration, sovereignty, and all that. What is the impact of the Brexit on the European Union and African relations, and especially when the world is supposed to be coming together? What is the impact on globalization, especially on issues of African trade, immigration, and stuff? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, let's have the ambassador. I'll probably allow some of the representatives down there to take who's seated here to take some of the questions, especially the question on private sector engagement. May I indulge the Dutch ambassador to tackle that, and then we'll come to. We'll come this side. Yeah.
Well, this is the occasion of Europe Day, so it should really be Timo, but we're here as Team Europe. And yeah, first of all, I would like to say is that we are complementary. It is very good that all the EU member states that are here, like the Netherlands, Germany, France, Sweden, and also others that have programs but that don't have embassies here, we try to work together as much as possible and not do our own flag planting. Yes, we're the Netherlands, we have a good reputation here, but I also want to say that we try to work together to improve what we do here together in South Sudan for the benefit of the South Sudanese. And this is, yeah, very important that we also explain a little bit what we do. As you were saying, is that we have been in a listening mode because we've been here for a long time in South Sudan. And so, yeah, we do our cooperation and we have a lot of drawbacks from things that we learned, and then there's again a problem and we have to start again. And so we try to listen and to learn from our past things that went well and also from our mistakes. And one of the things which is really important is indeed the youth. Youth is very, very central in our new programs. We have discussed that there was also a youth member in our Dutch Youth Council, Grace, you also know her. And they just have been really telling us what is important. And the private sector is very, very important to create jobs, but also to give for young people to take the future in their own hands. There are just not that much of possibilities. Cooperation cannot do it. We cannot do it here for South Sudan. It is the South Sudanese themselves, and it is the youth. So the ideas, also what we develop in private sector development, is what we do together with the youth. What is needed? How do we shape our support? And we usually link that to sectors that are already very important here in South Sudan. Agriculture. Agriculture is not something that you can come up with a grand scheme and say, okay, now we're going to do that. It's business. It is people, they have to have inputs. And what you were saying, it's linking so much also to how expensive that is. Why don't South Sudanese produce it themselves? So there's a lot of entrepreneurial things that we do in programs together with the young South Sudanese people.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like question on visa processing. Does the German have any comment on that?
Timo, you owe me. I mean, also Marian, I think you owe me. Tough question. I think as the embassies here, we all appreciate that issue. That's having to forward requests to, for our case, Kampala isn't the most comfortable situation. And yes, I think we are all like in conversations around with our headquarters, just to talk about what's the situation, what's the future also for our cooperation with South Sudan on the development side, but also on our representation. I think really there is a chance when South Sudan and the government of South Sudan becomes more engaged with us, that also the interest of the German government, for our case, would increase to be much more present here. But at the moment, having a consular section in Juba is a massive undertaking. And when I asked my headquarters, can we think about that? Can we talk about that? Can you come here? Can we have more people here to work on visa here in country? I get a no, a resounding no, because what we want to see is really the progress of South Sudan in the peace agreement, and that's why we're here on the political side and engaging with the government here. And we do want to see South Sudan prosper, and I think that's the moment when we can have more people here in the embassy to work on the visas. So unfortunately, not a good response, I think, not the response you want to hear, but that's
it's a German response.
Yes, very. I thought the Dutch were more straightforward, but maybe I'm more straightforward in this case.
But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is one country here in Juba, which is not a member of the European Union, who is thinking to bring fingerprints and visa stickers from Addis Ababa here to Juba and to issue a Schengen visa. This country is not present here. Is here? Really? Is here. Georg from Switzerland. So there is a plan, which I don't want to predict, but the Swiss embassy is seriously thinking to bring stickers, visa stickers, and fingerprints from Addis Ababa for all of you bright people of South Sudan, young generation, to travel to European Union institutions, to Brussels, Luxembourg, Strasbourg, and to EU 27 member states, and to Schengen countries as well. Hope we will see it very soon, Georg.
George, comment. It's like everyone wants to get everyone in trouble, so this is good.
I'm very sorry, and as we are not members of the EU, I still take the floor as a representative of the Swiss Cooperation Office, and I really thank you for this opportunity also to listen to you and to all your questions. I just think it's indeed a very difficult endeavor, and we need to manage expectations in regards to visa and how this is being dealt with. And this is just what I wanted to say, but thank you for mentioning that at least there is thinking about it.
This is a very good answer. Just to be clear, so that people who don't know, diplomats are actually politicians.
No, we're not.
Can take the remaining questions.
All right. Okay. By the way, this issue about issuing visas and so, it's if you would get tourists to South Sudan, that would be a game changer. But of course, that would require peace and the product. And the product is there. I've seen the wildlife from the air. Incredible. Mind-blowing, opportunities that you would have for tourism. And if you would have that, then you would consular cooperation would also
Ambassador,
follow.
that is very interesting.
Yeah.
That shows like the subliminal privileges you have. None of us here has seen the wildlife from the air.
We are supporting biodiversity in the country. So, but it's not only that, but it's also, cultural tourism and so I think there's a lot of opportunities. So it's like consular cooperation, follows those kind of tracks of where, population movements and so. But, I really want to, just highlight this Schengen thing, which we are talking about European cooperation. It's amazing, still for me, having lived in the time when you needed to have your passport stamped on European borders, that you can travel from Lisbon to Helsinki, from Amsterdam to Athens, without a passport. It is really something that is really concrete, and that, those kind of things, make EU popular. Another thing is roaming fees, that, you can call from any other European country, well, not any other, but, most European countries, at the same price as you would be calling from your own home country. These kind of things, like make EU popular, despite directives and bureaucracy and everything. Oh, but questions. Arrivals, plans to airlift people, and so, I see Olivier Boecher here, head of the ECHO office. Wave, Olivier. I'm not putting you on the spot, but ECHO, our humanitarian arm, especially is looking very closely about what's happening with the Sudan situation and people moving here. And we've been briefed quite well by our partners, mainly in the UN, about what's happening on the borders. And indeed, situations are building up. We are talking about tens of thousands of people starting to get stranded, and they are trying to work out solutions. But it's actually not the job of the European Union. We will try to support that, and trying to find I know what is not wanted by the government or the UN is to build up new massive refugee camps. Because we have seen that, those tend then to stay. And I think, they're trying to find solutions that would unlock this problem, help these people that are vulnerable, without creating new structures that might be then there for the long term. How to do that, I don't know, because we know that, logistically it's a bottleneck, rank, roads becoming soon impassable with the rains, airlifts, too expensive, can't do it. So now they're looking at river transports and so. There was a UNHCR, IOM call for support, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, which we are certainly looking at. And Brussels and our ECHO, our humanitarian office, are very much awake about this issue, about how to support the neighboring countries of Sudan, of tackling the refugee inflows.
Is there like a number that is put on the current call? Or?
I can't. The call was a bit less than $100 million for the whole humanitarian community from South Sudan to tackle this issue. And I think the plan, and I'm talking about things that, for example, Peter from IOM could talk with much more conviction, but about how to tackle this issue, that it doesn't become a permanent structural problem, and try to, for example, most of these people that come are South Sudanese returnees, more than, around 90% or even more. To look at if there's places that they could return to. But of course, return to your place of origin is not always possible. So anyway, about this funding issue, so no plans of EU airlifts or anything like that. But Brussels is very much looking at, the possibility of increasing funding for the neighbors of Sudan, on how to tackle this. And to the credit of South Sudan, I have to say that, South Sudan has kept its borders open. They allow people to come in. That's a very commendable thing to do. It's not. The situation is not the same in all borders. So you can give claps for yourselves, a very humane thing to do. But, support for these kind of operations would come from our humanitarian budget. But we need to look also put things in perspective. When we are talking about returnees and refugees from Sudan, we are talking about tens of thousands of people now. Maybe, I don't know where the figure is now, maybe 20,000 or something like that.
I think people think like in the range of like 40, 50.
50,000. Whereas there's 9 million South Sudanese in need of humanitarian assistance in the country alone. So we need to put these also in perspective. So you have these support that needs to be given for people in need, but at the same time you have this humanitarian crisis in the country that needs attention. Do
you think like in South Sudan, and probably like I'm not like, do you think in South Sudan the nature of the continuous chain of suffering and humanitarian upheaval in this country, do you think at times it make like such kind of imagined issues less sounding at times?
Well, it's a protracted crisis, and in fact, when you look at the numbers, you have more people in need of aid here than before, even more than during the war, the civil war here. So it is. And it's to a very large extent man-made, a security issue. But of course, you have the flooding also compounding the thing in the last years. It is. You hear when you attend, these kind of humanitarian meetings. You hear about fatigue, about that we have been here so long. We have been, billions of money have been, put into this, this humanitarian assistance. For how long? And how is it going to end? So we need to tackle these structural issues behind it. And the biggest structural issue is security of rule of law. That needs to be addressed so that we can unlock this situation and move forward. Because it's also there was this question about Ukraine and whether it has diverting our attention, our funding. For the European Union, the answer is no. Our development cooperation is at the higher level than it was before, with this 208 million first multi-annual program that we have for South Sudan. Our humanitarian aid is on a constant 80 million euros or dollars per year, which has not been reduced. And in that, these additional tranches have been, given to South Sudan as part of support to Horn of Africa. South Sudan being the biggest recipient, actually, of those additional tranches. So for us, the answer has not been, we have not reduced the funding because of what's happening in our own neighborhood. But clearly, needs are there. There's millions and millions of Ukrainian refugees hosted in European Union countries. And in terms of humanitarian needs, there are countries that actually, from a natural resources perspective, are worse off than South Sudan. When you're looking at Somalia, for example, or Yemen, in these places, even cultivation becomes a problem because of the droughts. Whereas here, you actually would have the resources. So these are very difficult issues, political, economic issues that need to be
So basically,
tackled.
you say like South Sudan is, like given South Sudan's resource position, it shouldn't be where it is.
It shouldn't. No, clearly, the agricultural potential. That's why we are also in development cooperation. We are in agriculture quite significantly and want to be, because we see the potential that is in all the areas that could be cultivated. Partly already are, and we've seen some very promising examples in a smaller scale, such as these horticultural producers. We are supporting infrastructure projects, for example, in Bahr el Ghazal, feeder road for agricultural produce to come in, so to try to address in some of these bottlenecks. But it's, the situation is of course different in different parts of the country, but in many places, the bottlenecks are security and infrastructure.
Yeah. I'll probably be wrapping it up soon.
I have questions.
Yeah, you
and there were more questions, but I know you have other programs.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
I'm just being very egoistic and selfish.
Is there any young person here who is in agriculture? Are you in agriculture? Okay. I just wanted to kind of, so that you can comment on what you have said. I want to, maybe you can take the mic and tell us. No, don't ask the question. Are you in agriculture? No, you're not in agriculture. Okay, good. Just wait. Because the questions I'll take it. Yeah. Is there anyone here who is in agriculture? You're in agriculture? Okay. Let me just. I just want to hear from you what you're doing in agriculture, and then probably because the ambassador is saying there is potential in that, I just want to hear what you're doing in agriculture, and maybe you could be the solutions to our problems.
Yeah, maybe.
I look at you. I think you're in fashion design, but don't hear me.
So you're asking to know what we actually do in agriculture.
Yeah.
Have you actually eaten food today?
Yes, I have.
Like seriously?
I don't know. I don't look like, but yes, I did.
Yeah, so, agriculture is one of the sectors in South Sudan that has just been sidelined. And talking about that, currently we have a lot of youths in South Sudan who are complaining about unemployment and a lot of things. But, there are some organizations here who are actually working so hard to empower the youths to embrace agribusiness as a self-employment tool. So this is one of even our campaign projects under the UN Youth Delegate Programs. And we are actually partnering with a lot of the Netherlands Embassy is supporting us. UNFAO is also supporting us. And though I've seen some days back, the European Union also hosted some kind of exhibition for fruits and vegetables. So I think they're also kind of supporting. Though I've been following the Netherlands Embassy so much. They have a lot of projects onto agriculture.
And the Netherlands Embassy did not nudge you to say anything, right?
Not really. Not really.
I'm also.
Not really. Not really. But now the point is, I think I'm also urging the European Union to also push us so much to embrace agriculture as a self-employment tool. You get? Yeah, we have potential. South Sudan, the youths alone comprise of 73.8% of the population. You see? So, why can't we even push these youths to embrace agriculture? Right now, even we are facing food insecurity in the country. And we have able-bodied youths even who are sitting down here, who cannot even hold a hoe. You get? Yeah. So, for me, I do agriculture. And I can farm. Though sometimes, like, you look at me, you feel maybe I'm a fashion designer, no. But there is some
but don't you think that is the message? The message is like, you can be cool and still do agriculture.
Yeah,
maybe that's what you're sending.
That is the point. That's why we say we need to make agriculture look attractive. You get? Yeah. So someone like me, if I go into like any community and I tell people about agriculture, they will be like, yeah, I think it is a very good enterprise. But let us now leave the picture which has been painted onto agriculture in the previous years. Where like when you look at a farmer, someone will just judge you by your looks alone. You look raggish, what will be like, this guy is a farmer. You get? So that is the point. I don't know if you have a lot of...
Thank you so much for that. I think really this echoes what the ambassador is saying. We need more young people to embrace agriculture, and we need more people to champion that. As you're saying, like able-bodied, we need to make it cool. The previous UN... the previous AU youth envoy, IHB, had this campaign called Sexy Agriculture, where people are like doing agriculture and they look like nice and they look fashionable. I think the mic that you're holding is useful. And I think that's what you're doing. You're promoting more people to embrace agriculture. Thank you. What's your name again?
My name is Waniro Theophilus. I'm an extension officer for South Sudan. And I'm also at the same time a UN Youth Fellow.
Hey. The UN really scored good with having you as the youth fellow. Okay, thank you so much. You're in agriculture? You can say something about agriculture? Yeah, let's just hear from you and then we come to Ambassador to... because we are concluding, but I just few youth voices.
So my name is Stephen Ogua. I just wanted to share that I work in a program that is trying to create employment for young South Sudanese. We do technical and vocational education and training, TVET, but we also promote youth involvement in seed multiplication as a source of income. And I want to confirm here that in Western Bahr el Ghazal, we have been able to engage over 2,000 young people in agriculture, seed multiplication as a source of income. And the most interesting thing is that we started doing
just
this.
for the benefit, this audience is all iPhone, whatever, Samsung. What is seed multiplication?
We are talking about young people getting involved in producing seeds and then distributing these seeds, or rather selling these seeds to local communities so that the local communities can plant them. The value we see here is that it is reducing reliance on imported seeds. Someone spoke here about a lot of imports of, supplies in South Sudan. So we are trying to ensure that some of this production are happening locally here. And for me, the most interesting thing is the fact that the young people who got involved in this in the year 2018 still continue to do it.
Yeah.
And I wish to say that that is actually an indication that this is working quite strongly.
Yeah,
so I represent another work for a program that has brought together 4 organizations to work together in fixing, as a consortium, to work together in fixing youth unemployment in South Sudan. And Norwegian Refugee Council is the lead, but they are working together with Finn Church Aid, a local organization called Vocational Skills Development Organization, and Across. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
That's
thank
all
you
I
so
have.
much for that. Let's have the mic with the ambassador. I think this puts things into perspective a bit, or at least gives us a bit of a hopeful picture.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I say something on agriculture?
Yeah.
I'm a farmer's son myself. So my late father was a dairy farmer, and we had 13 cows in our small farm in Finland. 13 doesn't sound much in South Sudanese terms. I'm almost like shameful.
That can't get someone. You can't marry with that here.
No, I guess so. But Adela, 70 million, that's around the figure that we are planning for agriculture, mostly about agriculture, isn't it? Around 70. Right, okay.
80, eh? Okay.
Yeah. So it's not pocket money, it's rather substantial. So we hope it will make a difference.
Okay, I'll just take 2 more questions and then we can wrap it up.
I had here.
You had 2 here.
So
there's a question on Brexit.
There was a Brexit question, and then Ukraine visas we tackled. Thank you.
And the private sector engagement.
Quality education, private sector engagement. But I can keep them short. My responses.
Okay,
so
cool.
if you want to take more, I remember this. But if you want to take more now, so we can continue.
Okay, let's let me hear who else has a question. Women. Okay, I think the women are very, very much okay with all the answers that has been given so far. Gentlemen here, maybe Newell, you can give them the mic and you can just really keep your question concise. This will be the last questions that I'm taking so that we just wrap it up with that. I'm a bit lenient because it's a youth day and we want more voices from the youth. So your name and then your question.
Thank you so much. My name is Abraham Piang. I represent the youth consortium of Shabab Le Shabab. It's a network of youth and youth focused organization. My question will be specifically looking at the issue of capacity building of the youth-led institution. It has been a song that has been sang for so many years, and I wanted to ask the EU team, what are they doing in making sure that the youth and the local-led institutions are capacity built in building them to become a direct recipients of the funds that are coming from the EU and the embassies and the rest of the institution, because these are the people who usually go to the grassroots level. And looking at it, I'm looking at it in a term that if you look at the conditions that are being put on the issues of requesting for fund, Nelson, you mentioned it before, how difficult it was for you to get the fund, right? What is the EU team doing in making sure that the institution are capacity built so that they can even become consortium and making sure that they reach the grassroots level? Thank you so much.
Okay, super.
Thank you, Nelson. My name is Agok. Thank you, Ambassador, for your great insights. During your interaction, you pointed out that EU is supporting South Sudan full ascension into East Africa community. Since this conversation started almost 3 years ago, there have been voices among South Sudanese that time is not right. South Sudan is not ready in terms of skills, in terms of other things that South Sudan would be taken advantage of. What do you make of that? Thank you.
Okay, you're talking about like the labor market and stuff like that, right? Okay, all of it. Oh, super.
Ambassador Dilomat, my name is Yoel Gatkot, but I go as Chain Gatkot. I'm an activist, I'm a peace and human rights activist, and I'm running an organization called PAPA, South Sudan, of an African Peacemakers Alliance. My question goes directly to the ambassador. You know, the African problem is on leadership. I'm very confident that most of the young people here would agree with me that it is the real problem is on the leadership part. So my question is, how can the European Union contribute to strengthening democracies, good governance, human rights in South Sudan during this transitional period? Thank you so much.
Okay. You're not asking the EU to fund you to run for office, right? Okay.
Yes.
Like really keep it short, and then we can take the last one, and that will be it.
Yeah, thank you. I earlier mentioned my name as Justason Victor Iwosa, and I work for a national organization called Yamora. But first question is, December 2024, that is the elections scheduled for South Sudan. Are there opportunities that the EU is seeing in respect to the elections?
Okay. Yeah, that is the question. Good. That one was, yeah.
Yes.
Good question. Give to the gentleman
Please,
behind.
I have another one. Short one. Thank you. Yes. It has been mentioned complexity, a lot of like procedures, and you said you have the passion, the determination, and you understand what you want to do. Ambassador, do you see that maybe there is a certain point where the EU has to start? For example, when we have to do something together with the youth, maybe that has been taken so high, we have to get somewhere to get started? Thank you.
You're talking about the processes, making it a bit youth friendly, or making it a bit, or uplifting the youth organization to be able to apply for funding from EU directly?
Yes, I'm asking if they really understand us like the youth-led organizations and the youth and yeah.
What do you mean by understand us? Sorry, I really want to get your question.
Yes, thank you. The concern here is a standard is being set. Under what context is that standard being set? Has it been collaboratively, like with the youth? How did we get to that standard that's where you have to be picking up from? Do we understand the context?
Okay,
Thank
super.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here today. This is my first time to be here, but I've always followed this Seniors Hub online, on Twitter. I'm very happy because what has been happening so far is what we all needed as South Sudanese youth, let me say. Let me just talk about youth themselves. This is about innovation. It's Innovation Hub. So if I happen to make a robot today, where would I go? Where would I go? Would I come here and then get some way to put it to the next level, or would I just sit with it in my small lab? So South Sudan is a country that is young and has a lot of talent that is within it, but no one knows about it. If someone else is elsewhere around the world, what do you know South Sudan? What they will say South Sudan is a war-torn country. That's all they know about South Sudan. It's a war-torn country. But beneath South Sudan, there is some hidden talent. There is a lot more that is hidden, but there is no way that is brought up so that the world can see the light in South Sudan. So my question, I don't know if it is a question, it's more like a request, because if we have an innovation hub like Seniors Hub, this could be a go-to place for someone like me. Oh, I didn't introduce myself, but I'll read that at the end. Someone like me who may have an innovative idea that can make South Sudan a better place, so that someone else can know that South Sudan has done something good in a certain way. So if I made a robot, maybe Seniors Hub could be the place to come to, and then my robot could be something. Someone else could do this elsewhere, but that would come from South Sudan. So everyone here talking about youth support, youth innovation,
What I think we need is a youth innovation hub, somewhere where the youth can come, they experiment, they test their ideas. Maybe the support they will get around this environment can make them build something that South Sudan will be known for. So if AU has the capacity to support South Sudan, especially the youth, maybe they could look into this, build a tech innovation hub where someone who has an idea can come, collaborate with other members within, and then build something that will be seen later.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
My introduction.
Your
Sorry,
name?
I didn't introduce myself. I'm called Mathiang Matthew. I'm a student, but I've been in Uganda. I'm a tech entrepreneur, I guess like you. So this is I can call it a startup, but this is a web design agency. But under this web design agency, I came up with something else because we use technology to solve our community problems. So under this agency, I've also come up with something else. I have the documents here. I'm trying to look for support so that it can be seen in the whole country. And maybe it can change lives within South Sudan overall. But so far I've been stuck with it. I have the whole idea, the whole concept is ready, but I don't know where to go.
Email seniors, get my WhatsApp number, and then we can pick it up from there.
I'll just give you my pitch deck. It's already here.
Okay, just hand it to me after this event, and then we can pick it up from there. You can hand the mic to the ambassador to answer some of the questions. Basically, what he's saying that partners, please support seniors to be able to support him. I'm summarizing what he said.
All right. Okay. I thought I would be able to keep track on all the questions, but I hope I am able to do that. There's this question of quality of education, and that it's not only about quantity but quality, and that's clear. I think we did a mistake also as a donor community down the line when there was very much emphasis about just graduating people without looking at the quality of their education. I think that has been recognized globally. And by the way, it's not only through our country program that the EU is supporting education, but it's also through our global initiatives where we are also participating in funding, such as Education Cannot Wait and the Global Partnership for Education. So money trickling from different levels. What that then means in the reality of South Sudan, I'm ill-equipped to say, if the support that we have been rendering, if it has been then translated into quality products every time, because the situations, the operational environment is quite difficult in many places in South Sudan. And that's when you're trying to have qualified teachers in place with the right material, and then when you try to cover big areas of the country, I do recognize that quality might suffer in comparisons of coverage. But then the question is, if you have this choice, then what do you do? But not being a specialist in the area, I really can't say on individual cases. But it's true when you look at the national figures. Clearly South Sudan has work to do, and social services such as education should actually be, like you mentioned, it's really ultimately for the government. It's not for the donors to do that in the long run in the sustainability. Question on impact of Brexit. There was a time when I didn't touch any question on Brexit with a 10-foot pole, it being so political, and it's a reality. It's happened, and I personally very much regret losing our UK friends from the EU fold. One of the things that it has meant in the European Union is that there's not a lot of appetite of leaving the Union as a consequence of that divorce that we had with the United Kingdom. Now the effects in the European continent on Brexit has been a little bit blurred because we had the COVID epidemic right away, and now the Ukraine war. But then I think the question was also about EU-Africa relations and how it has...
Hasn't the pendulum swung back with Russian aggression? It seems like there's more appetite to join the EU now.
Definitely, there's a lot of countries on the footsteps of the EU, and I think that's That's a healthy, welcome process. And as we had these arrivals of countries to the EU that need to go went through quite a demanding process in order to adhere to the standards and principles that that are required to be a union member. And I think that speaks about the motivation of countries of joining and integrating. But indeed, Western Balkans, indeed Ukraine itself, Georgia, many countries are interested in it. So there's, I think ultimately, when you think about what is interesting and what is successful, people vote with their feet, and that's the best, indication for that. But, so I'm no further. Obviously, with the UK, we lost a lot of knowledge and skills also in African affairs. With the UK long history in parts of the African continent, and I think that's something that I personally very much regret. But I think it's something that we still have a very close partnership because we want the same thing with the United Kingdom, and very much looking forward for the coronation ceremonies tomorrow that we're going to follow.
Do you like? But here, like when you meet with the EU ambassador, with the UK ambassador, it is high, or it's like someone meeting their ex.
I have no issues. I have no issues. No hard feelings at all. No, it's also maybe it's because the Nordic countries where I come from, the UK. There's a lot of cultural affinities and similarities, and also widely in Europe. So I'm getting into politically very dangerous waters here, talking so extensively about this issue, but. Even if my good UK colleague Guy would be here, I would not be afraid to say that. We globally we try to do the same things.
Still work together.
Same boat. Yeah, we are in the same boat, even with this history that we have, recent history. The capacity building for youth organizations, direct recipients of funds. That's linked to the later questions where we had about, about accessing of funds. We do have capacity building as part of our support to the NGOs, also here in South Sudan, through some of our programs that we are cooperating with civil society. And civil society is an important partner for us, both in terms of service delivery, but also in terms of supporting governance and so. So it's part of it, and it's part of some of our programs. Here locally, we don't usually work directly with the civil society organizations because it would be quite an administrative burden with the budgets that we have, with the work that we are doing. So we are oftentimes working through intermediaries.
What is the minimum that the EU gives?
Minimum?
Yeah.
We are talking about, in the minimum range, we are talking about hundreds of thousands, something like hundreds of thousands. I don't think we don't have $1,000, $10,000 projects. Help me out here, ladies. Minimum amounts that we give? Minimum amounts of projects? Yeah. That's right. So that's what we are.
That can be quite an administrative burden for a small organization.
And it is, and that's why when you're talking about real community-based organizations, then we can't straight from the delegation, support, a gardening venture directly in somewhere. So it's just not possible. When I was the ambassador for Finland, it was quite nice because I had this small fund with the administrators. I don't know if you have that, Marjan, but I used to have it. It was very convenient because you could then support these small 10,000, 15,000 ventures, and you get very good, it was very concrete and visible. But as the EU, you can't do it. It's just the scales are much bigger. And also we have, it's not only what we do directly as the delegation, but we have also these global calls for proposals for NGOs, and there we also have capacity building support. So that's something, if you're interested in this, follow the delegation social media, because when these calls come about, we inform about them. I'm afraid there's a lot of bureaucracy. But that's, again, a balancing act that you need to do in terms of, safeguarding the taxpayers' money that's well used versus the burden, administrative burden that it puts on the organizations. And I've experienced this myself in previous capacities, that it's unfortunate that sometimes you have like a fantastic idea and a good project, but then when you look at the budget, it's just not up to scratch, and then you can't help it. And you just can't take that decision and say yes, even if you burn for the desire of doing it. So that's how we operate. East Africa Community, integration of South Sudan into it, and I know that the process is kind of underway and it's not full yet. This is what I was talking about. This is the technical plus political. The question about identifying your interest in those negotiations when you go, and of course East Africa Community, even though it's not as tightly knit as the EU, it's still a customs union. And when you want to be a fully fledged member of the customs union, you need to do sacrifices in order to get gains. And those are political decisions that you ultimately have to make. What do you do, and what do you want to protect? But I have to say, from what I'm witnessing here, and I used to work in Kenya more than 20 years ago, and I saw a bit something similar, but not as strong here than here, that actually you see integration happening, even if it's not political. How many people have we been studying in Uganda, having been families there, or Kenya, and so that's kind of integration, quite close-knit integration as well, which could be benefited from, the circular migration of getting skills, and that's happening. But maybe it could be more efficient. And of course, you have all these produce coming from East African countries to the shelves here. And I think, honestly, there should be more South Sudanese produce there. How to do that might be a long road, but I think I'm very much pro-integration myself. So I would hope that, these technical and political decisions can be reached so that things work out, and then you would also, hopefully, then also be benefiting from those markets that are out there when the production really starts. There was this question about elections, 2024. We are supporting this transition agenda and this movement towards the elections through a variety of ways. It's through our governance agenda, where we are supporting the Ministry of Justice for example, in drafting legislation. So we are giving them, through intermediaries, technical support in drafting, and many of these laws that are supposed to have already partly come to place, and many more that should be coming into place. We have been trying to support that process. We are supporting the RJMEC and the CITISAM, these mechanisms that are supporting the peace treaty. And yes, we are interested in supporting the elections as well, and holding the elections. That's something that we are planning for as well. So we want to help South Sudan, pass this finishing line in the transition period and get those elections going. And I have to say, by the way, one thing that I personally am quite enthusiastic about, and really, really hope that I will see happening during my tenure here is the Constitution. Like, imagine, a new social contract for a country. What is more exciting than that? I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I think it's, it's seen as a challenge, but I think it should be seen as an opportunity, really. And I think I really, really, that's something that we are also trying to, through our legal assistance, be there also involved in. But I think it's really, really interesting. So that's part of our political messaging is that, let's bring this over the finishing line, and hopefully we'll then also have been contributing to enable to also attend those deadlines. Leadership, yes. This one thing that is absolutely clear, and what is important, is that our support has to be apolitical. So sorry, we won't be funding anybody's campaigns. So that's quite important. It's this issue about, in diplomacy, you have this thing about promoting human rights and universally and agreed values. and these kind of things, and that's a part of our political dialogue and what we are also doing and discussing with the government. But then there's this issue about non-interference in internal political business, and that's where the line is then drawn, that you can't support anything that is political. And so that's quite important. So maybe just to make that point. And I think I exhausted my questions.
Ambassador Timo, thank you for coming to Seniors Hub.
Yeah.
EU team, thank you for dedicating your time. I think this was worthwhile. Very much, we started high level all the way from Finland to EU to Brexit to the rest. But I think it's for the benefit of the youth. It's a very globalized society. And I think the youth here are interested in all the discussions that are happening globally, regionally, and also in South Sudan. And thank you for dedicating your time. Thank you for the EU team. Can we give a round of applause to the ambassador? And if people want to reach you, who is the comms EU contact person?
I think it's
Dionys.
Dionys.
It's Dionys, right?
Here.
Yeah.
Dionys, yeah. He's the jack of all trades in the delegation. So anything.
Yeah.
Especially, if you want to say something nice, you can approach me. If you have complaints, then go to Dionys.
I think that's a very good way of putting it. Thank you so much.